Selections from 1, 2, and sometimes 3. Choices. Left or right, up or down, choices surround. Each one tied to a repercussion, right or wrong, it's often sudden. No matter what the circumstances, choices are bound by consequences. Each choice represents both risk and reward, where outcomes are decided once explored. Learning from others is quite effective, especially when those choices are potentially negative. Daddy's feet. My daddy works and works all day. He works so hard, I have to say. He comes home tired, he comes home beat. Come here, boy, and rub my feet. I sit right down and take my place as his toes approach my face. Upon my lap so thin and small, he rests his feet 16 inches tall. I start to rub and twist and squeeze. I've lost all feeling in my knees. Corns and calluses, nails and hair, and other things I'd rather not share. It's pretty gross, these feet I dread. I go to a happy place in my head. I imagine tiny people living on his toes in a fungal jungle plugging up their nose. Toe jam swamps and Mount Toenail, floating on his sweaty feet they sail. I am brought back when my father shakes, belly scratches and noises he makes. His eyes open and he yawns a yawn. The feeling in my legs is gone. Good job, boy, rubbing my feet. He picks me up and we go to eat. We wash our hands, but they still smell weird. We sit and say grace as he scratches his beard. We eat and we laugh and we talk. Then we go down the street for a walk. His legs are strong and his strides are long. I hear his gruff voice break into song. He belts out a tune and I sing my heart out. He sings like an angel, while mine is more of a shout. We get home and we sit by the fire. My eyelids droop and I'm ready to retire. The fire feels good, warmed by the heat. My daddy puts me to bed by rubbing my feet. The Lance Dance. A new boy walked into the classroom. When asked his name, he whispered, Lance. The teacher asked him what he enjoyed, to which he mumbled, I like to dance. The boys all laughed and the girls all giggled. They couldn't believe their ears. Lance just shrugged his shoulders, went to the back, trying to hide his fears. He didn't talk much and he kept to himself, always staring at the floor. But I'll never forget at recess a week later, and this is what I'll remember him for. He went to the edge of the playground where the grass didn't grow anymore. He slid off his jacket, his feet started to shuffle as dirt clouded up from the floor. Lance started off with a few basic steps. His moves were precise and slow. Students gathered around, the noise was muted in anticipation of the show. But Lance didn't notice the crowd moving in his world all alone. He started to move like they'd never seen, poetry of flesh and bone. His shoulders started shaking and his feet started gliding across the ground. His hips started twisting and his body started turning around. Lance danced with such passion, Lance danced with such ease. Lance danced till exhausted, his hands fell to his knees. Then the crowd erupted into the most thunderous roar, a roar soon replaced by chants of more, more, more. A surprised Lance looked up, embarrassed by the praise, but he couldn't escape the students' astonished gaze. He sheepishly picked up his jacket and moved through the crowd. He kicked the dust off his shoes as the crowd became loud, loud with hoots and hollers and pats on the back. That's when the clouds came in and the sky turned black. The rain came down and washed Lance's dance steps away. Like a rainbow, the most beautiful things aren't permitted to stay. And the rest of the day, Lance was the talk of the school, a mysterious newcomer, the new definition of cool. The laughter turned to reverence, the giggles to sighs. yet he stayed in the back with a sad look in his eyes. The next day in school, there was emptiness in the air. The bell rang, and in back there sat an empty chair. I think we all knew that we would never again see Lance and experience the hypnotic trance of his dance. But sometimes at recess we sit where the grass doesn't grow and try to recapture the essence of what Lance helped us know. Dirty, dumb dog. I have a dirty, dumb dog. He is clean as trash and smart as a log. He rolls around outside and he smells kind of funny. He constantly slobbers and his nose is kind of runny. He looks pretty good from pretty far away, but the closer you get, the farther you want to stay. My dirty, dumb dog doesn't seem to mind. He's always pretty happy, always pretty kind. I tell him to sit, and he runs far away. I tell him to go, and he always seems to stay. He really likes to nibble, though it feels like a bite. He likes to jump on me and play all night. He licks everything around. He licks the wall and he licks the ground. He licks his bottom, he licks everything in sight. Then he gives me a great big lick goodnight. His mouth is big, but his tongue is much bigger. And how that happened, I can't quite figure. My dog sheds fur almost everywhere. I guess he just really likes to share. He sheds on the couch, he sheds on the floor. The older he gets, he sheds more and more. He must be busy growing all that fur. I thought by now he'd be bald for sure. My dog doesn't talk, but I talk to him. I think the light inside his head is pretty darn dim. He has big ears, so I know that he hears. So I tell him my greatest dreams and my darkest fears. Maybe he hears and understands just fine. But for now he seems content to just bark and whine. My dirty dumb dog won't let me sleep. Just as I'm dozing off, I hear a whiny peep. He hates to be alone. He loves my company. I suppose I can't get mad. That would be wrong, you see. I guess in the end, my dirty dog is kind of sweet. Ouch! Darn dog just came and bit my feet. These hands. I awoke one morning gazing at these hands, transfixed on how they follow the slightest commands. I knew in that moment that these hands could do anything as long as I guided these hands with focus and feeling. These hands could help me become an architect, doctor, or lawyer, an athlete, soldier, politician, or inventor. Anything was possible during that moment of insight. I felt all opportunities were now my birthright. Moments like these are often fleeting and very hard to pin down for safekeeping. The next time I find myself in desperate need of inspiration, I will give these hands my undivided attention. The unlikeliest hero. There once lived the most evil queen with the darkest soul you have ever seen. And she ruled the kingdom with cruelty and hate. Peasants suffered the most horrific fate. They were starved near death and worked to the bone, while she pointed her finger from her witch's throne. But across the way there lived a heroic king who could not stand to see such an unjust thing. So he gathered his soldiers, his brightest and best, and vowed to vanquish this evil before he would rest. The king brought with him his only son to see how the battle would soon be won. Now this son was not a soldier of any kind. In fact, a more skittish soul it would be hard to find. The last thing you would call this son was brave, but his father's approval he did sorely crave. So he followed along as he watched his back, jumping and screaming with every creak and crack. The brave king led his army right up to the gate and called out, "Queen, you must face your fate." The gate slowly opened, and the queen came out. Her eyes grew black, and she began to shout. Now the son was so scared, so petrified, he ran round the corner to cry and hide. Now the queen's words were of the magical kind. The sky darkened, and the soldiers were blind. Her next phrases were dark and evil and crass, causing the king and his army to shatter like glass. Just like that, they were gone. Then she turned her head and saw the king's son with a face full of dread. She grabbed him and took him up to the tower to look at his old home that she would soon devour. The son was so scared, tears flowed from his eyes and covered the ground as his cries filled the skies. As the queen turned to leave, she slipped on his tears. She fell off the tower, ending all the town's fears. Bugger of a hugger. My friends speak of little brothers and sisters with hateful spite, siblings that hit and whine and pout and fight, brothers who scratch and yell and ride bikes over nails, sisters who throw fits and cut hair and pull on pigtails. Well, let me tell you a thing or two about that. None of that compares to my little brat. My little sister has the most horrific habit, bouncing around like a little brat rabbit. This habit is worse than hitting or scratching, worse than spitting or biting or evil plan hatching. My little sister is the worst little bugger. My little sister is a compulsive hugger. She hugs everybody she sees. She hugs babies around the head and adults around the knees. Worst of all, I seem to be her favorite person alive. She sits there at home just waiting for me to arrive. And once she gets hold, she doesn't let go. Her arms are like chains and her strength seems to grow. And my parents don't care. In fact, hugs they enjoy. I need a plan now, a plan to employ. Before she infects me with cooties or hugs me to death, I have nightmares of her hugging out my last breath. And recently I realized how dangerous she can be. An incident involving her, some ivy, and me. Because not only does she love hugging everyone she sees, she loves hugging animals and toys and apparently trees. And by one of these trees there was a green little vine. The 3 little leaves should have been an obvious sign. She went in for one of her famous bear hugs, and she squeezed the whole tree and the ivy and bugs. And guess who was lucky enough to be the next one she hugged? Yep, I had no choice. I just held my breath and shrugged. Now I am here with this little bugger. My health she has stolen. We are both itchy and scratchy and bloated and swollen. We are painted with lotion, and she gives me a tug. And with the goofiest grin on her face, she gives me a hug.